People hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, there's one. How many people do we have? Can I start or?
We still haven't got Anne, but she's missed 2 sessions already, so that doesn't augur well for her being here today.
Okay, so how many people do we have, Rhonda, and can everybody hear me?
You've got Pam, and you've got Radu, and you've got me.
Okay,
Pam?
Pam, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good, okay, so we're ready to start.
Well, welcome everybody. Steffi's going to do the presentation this morning. Steffi Johnson from Esoteric Technologies. Thank you for being with us, and off you go, Steffi.
Okay, great, thanks. You can all see my screen, so we'll start with Jigsaw. Jigsaw, and today what I'm going to do is rectification in Jigsaw. So I won't be looking so much at the family and research sections, although if we have the question time at the end and you have a couple of questions, I can attempt to answer them for you. But what I want to do today is go through the rectification section of Jigsaw, and I'll be sharing how I use it in my work. I do rectifications for people around the world. I was part of the absolute beginning of Jigsaw. Was worked predominantly on by Bernadette Brady and Graham Dawson, but I have been part of the version since then. And it's quite a complex program. It's one that looks and feels quite different to our other software, and hence I think it's one of those ones that once you become familiar with, it's very, very powerful and handy to use. What I do, when people ask me about Jigsaw, I always say it's kind of like a reference tool. It's not necessarily for the beginner, but it's certainly very handy for advanced work or for the work that you're doing. If you have any questions along the line, please do feel free to stop. There's only a couple of us online today, so if there's something you don't understand or something you want to explain further, but I will be going through the rectification section bit by bit. I've just, before we start, one of the main things about Jigsaw is entering data, and we will have a look at the data screen as well. But I just want to make you familiar with the overall structure and the fact that there are these online tutorials, which if you have, these days everyone has internet connection. I do suggest, as Bernadette Brady herself says, that you have a cup of tea and sit down and go through these tutorials. They are actually very informative. So you'll see here that the overall structure of Jigsaw and the way it's been designed is it's designed to handle a lot of astrological data, basically, and to do a lot of number crunching. So the whole starting point of Jigsaw is the data files. These data files feed into the 3 different sections. I think it's important to get this structure familiar, because if you're working on rectification, you still come to the data files as your starting point. If you're working on family, the same thing, and research, the same thing. Obviously, the information in these 3 sections will be different according to what project you're working on, but the data files are the starting point. So what we'll be doing today is going up through this section here, really, looking at data files, rectification. I'm going to mainly work with the manual rectification. We will just touch on this rectifier that was put into later versions. We're going to look at the graphs, the angle search, and the test angles. And also what I'm going to be doing is sharing some of the theory of how I work with rectification, because this particular version of Jigsaw and this method is based on what is called graphic rectification. This was originated by Robert Hand. Bernadette Brady was sitting in Rob Hand's Cape Cod house, and they were discussing it, and she picked up on the whole theory of graphic rectification and ran with it. Then years later approached Graham and myself to do Jigsaw. So this is only one method, if you like, of rectification. We have since, which was basically at the time based on transits and progressions, and mainly transits. We've since added solar arcs and other things that people have requested, and tried to make it broader so that other versions of rectification can also be utilised. But the first thing that we do is we come to a file new. When we come to file new, Jigsaw's going to ask us for a project title. Now the reason for this is that we've got these three different sections that I referred to before. So it's handy in your title to actually have what you're working on. So you may have Jean Bloggs' family or my research or whatever you want to call it, but in this case we would call it so-and-so's rectification. And normally what I do here is I put my client's full name here and call it rectification. This is separate or different to the file name that it will be stored in your computer folder for. So this is the title of the project. So it's the clarification. Then you'll see we get, when we click on OK, we see that we then get asked for a file name. And this is where it will be stored in C, Jigsaw, user data. The last file name of the project that you had open will be there, but today we can call it Demo Day. Demo Day. And then it will be called a .dat file. All the data files are called .dat. You may wonder why that's important. We'll get into that later, but it's enough to know that that's where it's going to be stored, so that if you're looking for it, if you've lost it on your list, you know where it is later. That then takes us through to our Edit Data screen. You'll see the title up here for clarification. You'll see your current record for editing. This is where you work, where you start with your rectification project. This is important because let me go back a step actually before we actually get into Jigsaw. Let's go back to working with your client. This is where, once you've got to this stage that we're looking at now, you've been approached by a client, you've been asked to find a birth time. If you're lucky, you'll have it within 2 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours. A lot of rectification projects you'll be working on, or people who you'll be working with, may not have any time at all. I've had some people who haven't even known the day. Then it's really, really tricky because you've got to take all the fast-moving points out and see if you can rectify using the Sun and Venus. But, you know, we're not going to that now, and it's getting a little bit specialist. But what we're looking for is a birth time, and we're going to go into more details of that. The first step, and I found this is just so important. Now, if I'm sort of telling you things that you already know, let me know. But I'm starting from where I start with my project. I'm sharing some of the experience that I've had. Your experiences might be very, very different, but you know, hopefully we can learn from each other. But the most important thing I've found is collecting the valid dates. The more valid you have, the tighter you can get the timing of your dates, the more accurately you can do your rectification. People often balk when they're wanting to do a rectification at the price, and because it's so time consuming to do one for a client. But they also sometimes try and skip through that, getting the records. I can't remember this, or I can't remember that. I emphasize over and over to my clients that I actually have discovered that this process can be very, very profound for them. It's a process of going back. It's almost a therapeutic process, because in finding the dates, they're actually working through subconsciously old events, and somehow it kind of brings them to the present day anyway. So it's quite profound and quite a beautiful process, and I find it really a privilege to be working with people on finding their birth times. But that's kind of the more philosophical side of it. The number crunching side of it is we need to get them as close as we can to the timing of an event. Now, even if somebody has a year, I'll show you how to do a year marker in Jigsaw. It is better to have that information than not have it at all. So somebody might remember, people will remember the birth of their children obviously, things like that. We'll go into the type of events that are important in it as well. But at the moment we're talking about how many events and the timing of them. JigSaw will allow you to do a year marker. So if somebody really can't remember dates, but they remember that, which is often the way, 1994 was the year in which, my partner left me, I moved house, and my mother died. It was such a big year, I can't remember the exact dates. Put that in as an important year, because you'll see a transit. It's not going to help you necessarily rectify initially, but it is going to help the rectification process. Sometimes people remember it was May 1999. Try and find out if it was middle or end of May, because JigSaw will give you up here a range date. So you can actually type in, say, the 15th of July 2009, and then you give it a date range of 15, and you've got all of July covered. These are the timing of the dates, but the type of dates that we're looking for, as I just said, the big years, the births, so even births of younger siblings. If you're an older child, or even if you're somewhere in the middle, the birth of a younger sibling can sometimes change the whole nature of the family, and certainly your whole role in the family, and therefore it can be a sensitive to the MC. What we're looking for, clearly, rectification is a tricky process, because particularly if someone has planets on an angle, and you're not going to know that, what we're looking for is more so outer planet transits, and some could say progressions in solar arcs. We're trying to get the precision changes, so the sensitivity of the ascendant and the MC. So we're looking for the types of events. I'm just going to change this here. The types of events that may be related to. That may be related to the ascendant, the descendant, the MC, and the IC. So we're looking here at births. In my case, Neptune on the MC was my first grandchild, so these things do show up in the chart. This changes the nature of your relationship again, the MC relationship to the family, etc. Deaths, I must admit, I have not found deaths to be as sensitive to the ascendant and the MC, but I have to say that some events we're collecting, because they're going to give us that added information that once we've actually got a birth time that we're pretty happy with, we can then see the whole chart in motion. So we then start to pull in some of these other events as well. So I've left that in the list that I was originally given myself, because I think they can be important for rectification. Major moves, obviously, of house, immigration. Again, we're looking at what is respective. It's a subjective thing in some cases. For some people, moving out of the childhood home and having to go on their own is a huge thing. For others, traveling around the world is not necessarily such a big thing. But mostly, I found immigration and moving house will show on an angle. Health, again, more so accidents and serious illness, rather than 9 months. But again, that's the ascendant. Your health and your happiness are so intrinsically linked. Achievements. These are more moments of recognition rather than personal goals, because again we're looking at that MC. And this is linked, of course, to career or work, major job changes, career changes, starting school, leaving school, and starting college or graduating from university. We find that a lot of people, we'll look at events that are very close together. We find that somebody might have their, graduated on December 15th, 1995, first job on January 21st, 1996. So they'll be very close together. get as much information from the client as possible, and as I said, as accurately as possible. It's better to have too much information than too little. Travel, yeah, I can still think this is an iPass thing, but again, it's going to show later when you've done your rectification. Travel which has changed a person, generally the best dates are your first overseas trip or the first time that you encountered a different culture. So travel as well, and of course one that many people have are marriages and divorces, so they're ones that people can actually, like the births of children and the births of siblings, they can normally get a more accurate date on. So these ones are good for many reasons. That's just an overview. I mean, I can send you this PDF file if you want to email me at admin@esatech.com.au. This is just something that I put together for my own work, but it's also really handy just to send to clients to give them an idea of what you need. I will say that over the years, you really can tell almost the person's chart from the information that they send you. I can pick the Capricorns and the Virgos almost immediately because they send accurate data. It's all beautifully typed out and it's all very, very precise. So right from the beginning, when doing a rectification, there are so many things that you can actually use to help you in your type kit. But as far as Jigsaw is concerned, it's a number cruncher. So we're looking at data. Now, just coming back to this, the number of dates, you need at least 15. I have rectified with less, but only when they're very, very accurate and I'm not as confident. The other thing is, as I said before, the year markers. Basically, we'll just start with some examples. For instance, you might have start of school. That's another big one. I mean, most people do it around the age of 5, but it doesn't hurt to have information. So first of January, that's not really first of January, but let's say they can't actually remember it was sometime in January. We'll do the 15th of January, say 1975, and we'll do a date range of 15 days. Now that's going to give you from the 1st of January to the 30th of January. And we'll add that as a new one. You might have moved home, house, and that might have been, say, I can't remember when, it was around about the middle of May, so 1978. 1978. In the middle of May, we put 15th of May, but we'll give it a date range of 7. Just in case people don't always have the best memory, so we'll add that as well. We've now got 2 dates down here in our data. Then remember that my sister was born, and she was born on the 21st of September. 1973. Let's say 1973. Oh, sorry, 1973. No date range is needed. You'll see that when I tab through, then you can have a time. Sorry, you can have the exact time. So they might have the exact time of the sister's birth. You might have a time and place. You might have a zone only, or you might have no time. Mostly there's no time. But clearly if it's somebody who's putting in their child's birth, you'll see that there is an exact time and place for that. The issue that I have with children's births in rectification is a lot of the time I believe a child's birth is actually to a planet, not an angle. So often, and this is anecdotally speaking, not a research project, but I have found that often it is a transit to the moon, It sometimes can even be a Saturn return, but nevertheless, as I said before, it is going to give you clear information about that person when you come to do the rectification, even if it's not as useful in the number crunching part of it. The first part of the process of rectification is establishing a rapport with that person and getting clear data, and that can sometimes involve some clearing and clearing. The next stage is doing what we're doing now, which is coming to Jigsaw and entering it in. If you have any questions about how to enter this data in, just let me know. You'll see down here that it's now in a different order. We can now come to the sort button. Actually, we'll add, so we'll come up here to add new. We've already added my sister, so we'll add new. And we'll go, I can't remember what happened, but my mother's friend died in 1979, and it was a really good year, affected the whole family. So you might write in here, important year. And then it helps to put in the nature, because what we're looking at, once we get to the transit and dynamic section of this Jigsaw, is we're looking at the nature of what a transit is. So if we can, at this point in time, Jigsaw is a very powerful tool. It will do the work for us in terms of the number crunching, but it is very much needing an astrologer's input and an astrologer's interpretation. And this is where it can be a little bit scary when you first start with it, because you're actually having to make some assessments along the way. But again, once in connecting with data, an important thing is, if you can kind of distill some information here that gives us as the astrologer, we know what we're trying to do is work out, was it a Saturnian year, was it an Neptunian year, did it have more of a Uranian flavour, or are we looking at something platonic? Important year, I can't remember, but it was, everything changed, it was all very sudden, and at the end of life was not the same, so we had upheaval sudden. Now, we then type in the year 19, well I said some numbers like 1980. You can just type in the year like that, you go add new, and it says here, do you wish this event to be added as a year number? And we click OK. Now you see that little X there, we're going to get into enabling and disabling records. Anything that has a little X next to it is something that is not going to be used by Jigsaw in its number crunching. It is going to be left there for us to assess as we go through the transits, but it's not actually accurate enough data for Jigsaw to use. So we might now want to sort this data just into the order. We've got sort option, time and date, record description and name, the zodiacal position, or ascending and descending. Now I like to work in terms of the years, so now it's moved this into year order, and you get some idea of the chronological order of the person's life. Now you can actually come back later and go, which I've done. Sometimes you type in the wrong thing. Also, I found that if you're dealing with people from America, they put their dates back to us anyway, and so it's easy to make mistakes. So you might want to go back and delete something, and it will always ask you, are you sure? I'm now going to switch to another file, just one that here's one we prepared earlier. To give you an idea of records on and off, but in terms of adding data, are there any questions on how that should be done in this particular edit data screen? Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of that, and I'm going to come up here to our file, and I'm going to open Buzz Aldrin's project as note. It will always ask you if you wish to open a notepad for the project when you open a file. I always click yes, because what can happen is with Jigsaw and with rectification, the rectification process is so long, and you may be halfway through something, or you may have actually entered all your data, And as you'll see later, you might have 6 times that you're gradually deleting, and this is really handy, this notepad, to actually write in here discarded 130, discarded 233, and working on 620, have not looked at 7 or 8 o'clock or whatever the other times are. Mostly I use it too if I've almost got to the end of the process and I'm working on 2 times. I'll put those 2 times in. Or when I've finished a project completely, I also just like, just for insurance purposes I guess, to put into the notepad the time that I chose and why I chose it. Clicking yes just brings that up, and you can just minimize it anyway, but as you can see, someone's typed in just a title there, no other information. So if we go to File, now we've opened a file, it's already opened. This is where the Jigsaw is a little bit different to Solar Fire and other programs where you actually see your chart there. You can see up here that you've actually got the current project open, but the other way of knowing that is that you've actually got it ticked down here. But what we want to actually do is come in here and edit the data. So in other words, we've opened the project, now we're opening the data, if you like. And you can see here all the different events in this person's life. Now clearly this has been put in as an example. The process of rectifying somebody famous's chart, and a lot of people, because I've been editing the Australian data collection, I get a lot of projects of people who are trying to rectify prominent Australians' data, and they send it to me and say, I've rectified this chart and this is what the time is. And that's fine, but what you end up with is a predominance of their public persona information. Now, clearly here, things like mother dying is different to walking on the moon, announcing that he would leave NASA. We've got some personal ones in here, but in a lot of famous people's charts, you have mainly just their career highlights. So it is important to get as many events and as broad a spectrum of events as we can. Now, the other thing is, I mentioned before here the markers. Here they're on the year markers, but what I'm actually going to do here is well, actually before we do that, sorry, we came in to edit data. We've edited our data and we've added our new data to our rectification process. The next step before we go anywhere else is to actually come to edit natal details. What we're doing in Jigsaw is we're giving Jigsaw the events, then we have to actually give it its starting point. So we have to come to this edit data and we have to put in the name of our person, the date that they were born, the fact that the time is unknown, where they were born, the time zone, and then we have to put in a search from too. Now, as you can see here, it's for the whole day. But if you were rectifying and somebody said, look, my mother thought it was breakfast time in the hospital, and I have a lot like that, breakfast time in the hospital, it's always, I think, wise to put in a wider search time. This is what this is where you're telling Jigsaw, I've just told you all the events I want you to match, but this is what I want you to match it to. All the possible sensitive angles on this particular day from this particular time range. That's why the rectification won't work unless you've got edit data filled in and the section filled in. So sometimes you'll see, it's easy to forget, you edit all your data and you go to rectify and it'll come up with a little message. And all it's saying is, come up here to your rectification and edit your natal details. So once you've got your data and your rectification in, you'll actually come to, now there are 2 ways of rectifying. I'm going to focus today on manual rectifying because I really feel this is the astrologer's tool. The auto rectify was put in to assist people to give us an idea of how to do it easily, and you can do it that way, but I just find that I get better results doing it myself, doing it manually. So we'll come to manual rectify, And the first thing it's going to do here is give us a rectification viability report. Now, we just talked about matching the data with the time zone. Now what Jigsaw is telling us is, can I do this? Can this program do this with what you've actually inputted as the astrologer? And it's saying here the interval between these two events is too small, and it's too small here, and it's too small there. And that's quite common, because as I said, often things happen very, very quickly. I separated from my partner and I moved house. That is often, this is where you come in, we'll go and have a look. The other thing it's giving here is a total summary of events, 17. It's telling you how many you've disabled, how many are invalid, and how many are usable. If there are too few that are usable, it will actually tell you here. Now, sometimes I choose to ignore that too few usable because A, I know I'm not going to get any more, and B, I'm quite happy with the fact that I may have 12 events, which is not my required 15 or more. But I'm quite happy that this is the best I'm going to get, or these are very accurate. If I've got to this stage and I've got too few, you can make a judgment call here, but normally you make that judgment call before you actually come to do your rectification. You'll see it when you enter in your data. You'll get a feeling and you'll know, no, I've got too few events and they're not accurate enough to work. And I really have to emphasise that the more accurate events, I've noticed if you have ever tried to use Jigsaw on your own charts and rectify that, really, if you have accurate events, it will get your birth time within 5, I believe, within 5 or 10 minutes. But again, it depends on those events. So I'm stressing that a bit because I really think that this is, Jigsaw can only work with what we input. But anyway, coming back to two view, this is very, very common. I've often done it myself. I've overlooked this. So we come back and we edit the events. And hang on, I should have checked. But here, two here may have been. Let me just go back and events 12 and 13, 15 and 16, and 16 and 17. Maybe taking event 16 out will clear that one up, but let's look at 12 and 13. So we've got 12, you went into a psychiatric home. 13, it's within 6 months. We make a judgment call here. This may have been more 12th house. This is me making a judgment call. This is where you come in and use your astrology. Retired from the Air Force may be more likely. We're not judging or assessing, is probably a better word. We're not assessing which event in this person's life was more important. We're assessing always from which event is going to trigger or be most likely to trigger one of those sensitive angles. So, you know, it's possible that he's got a planet right on the ascendant that rules the 12th house, but we don't know that. So I'm going to say that that might be less likely to be an angle, and this one's more likely to be an angle. So I'm going to put the record off. Now that leaves the record there. We can put it on whenever we want to with this record on. But what it's doing is it's saying to Jigsaw, well, I want you to rectify on this. It's still there. We'll look when we get to the dynamic chart screen. It's actually still there and we can still use it. And the other one that was married again, hospitalised, married again, publicly revealed for his alcoholism. This is a hard one to choose between them because marriage is likely to show up somewhere on an angle, I would have thought. Hospitalised, we could take that off, but it's still going to be too close between 16 and 17. I would tend to turn that one off, and I may even turn that one off. So we might end up again with, no, we've still got enough events. That's just giving you an example. I want to sort of move along to the rectification. I'm going to use somebody who's given me their permission to use their data. We'll just come here. We can see the current project is so-and-so's rectification. We can see down here that it's demo day .dat. We will come to the edit data so I can show you. Why isn't that showing up? That's interesting. Demo.dat, edit data. Well, that's interesting. It's not there. Oh, here it is. Should be here now. There we go. This is a typical kind of person who wrote and said to me, hello, I want to have my birth time rectified. I'm not sure if it's correct. I'm advised by my parents, now deceased, that they believe it was sometime after school's out because they remember hearing kids walking past outside. However, in England, kids coming home from school at 12 p.m. also for a hot lunch. So I'm unsure if it's after 12 or after 3 p.m. They landed on 3:38 p.m. for some reason. Hope you can help. It's a fairly typical and in some ways a very nice rectification because somebody has given you an anecdotal time reference. Often it's breakfast or dinner at the hospital, but this one's actually got the sound of children. Then we go through the information that's actually been given. So you can see how I've entered the data. He says maybe 1538, 338, but he also has the information about the schools. So we've got our data entered. We've done the edit natal data, which we've come up here, edit natal details. I've actually put from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. I've given it a nice wide range for Jigsaw to search to see what it comes up with. So then we can come to manual rectify, and we will get we've got no viability report this time because I've been through and either it's all been entered okay or I've been through and edited that data to get it to a nice viable set of data for Jigsaw to work with. So now we have the rectify, the graph page for rectification, our starting point. We have graph 1, we have the geocentric transits. Graph 2, we have the heliocentric transits. You can see here the planets that have been chosen. You can see down here we have secondary progressions. We can also see the harmonics, 12 harmonic, 12 harmonic, 12 harmonic. You can come down here. Now, this is set up, I think, as a default, but I may have changed it myself for my own work. But I'm pretty sure this is how it's set up as a default. But astrologers use all sorts of different harmonics and techniques at this point. But you can come in and change this if you want to. You can change graph 2 and 3. Graph 1 will always stay at 12 harmonic geocentric transits for obvious reasons. That's the basis of Jigsaw. It's taking the 12 harmonic transits to possible angles and it's number crunching that. Now, we've got the harmonic that you can change. You can change the coordinate system. You can change the calculation method on graph 1, 2 and 3. You can put all of the planets on. Clearly the Sun, Moon and Venus transits to angles, I'm not sure, and some people might use them, but you certainly have those ones here for your progressions. So we'll just go to, yeah, so you'll see here, this is graph 3 was our progressions, geocentric, and you've got so that all the options are there for you to work with. The graphs are constructed in Jigsaw by noting the position of the planets at the time of the events in the person's life. So these positions are then represented graphically on these graphs. That's why it's called graphic rectification, obviously. And when Rob Hand was first working with it, he used to have charts all over his table and draw them all up. So you can imagine it's like with solar fire, I guess, the excitement when this actually could be done by a powerful computer. Now, as I just pointed out, you can change the different components, but quite clearly, and it states this in the manual, and it's something that Bernadette states quite strongly, if both the geocentric transits graph and the heliocentric transits graph are used, then both the ascendant and the midheaven will more than likely be contained in these peaks of the two graphs. So what we're looking for are peaks. See 26 degrees, got one here at 12, 13 degrees, and we're looking at these peaks. So what we then do is we look at finding the angles. We're looking at these sensitive peaks. So we want to see which graphs to use. Now you can use any, but I use those two because that was what I was taught. That is what I find is useful, and that is what Bernadette stressed, that the heliocentric and the geocentric together work, and I've found that to be true. So I'm going to select these methods, but other astrologers will select others. Now what it's done is it's taken the highest peaks of both, it's combined them to see which are the most likely sensitive points. It's then taken all the possible planets that we've selected, the transits and the progressions, and it's come up with these two possible times. Now the interesting thing about this rectification is, and I mean, I'm going to sort of preempt hours and hours of work by just sort of summing up, but and we will go through the process of looking through all of this, but we will look at the viability of times. In actual fact, kids coming back and forth from the school could have been at both times in England at that time. But this has come up with only 2 times. Sometimes you'll have a list of 6, 7, 8. And particularly if it's over an entire day, I put it from 11 a.m. till 5 p.m. So these are the 2 times. Now, Bernadette would scream at me for saying that the ascendant will show the physicality of somebody, but I was actually taught some physiognomy, that's the right word, in my esoteric studies, and they swore that, and I believe it's true, having seen lots of clients come through the door, that you can actually tell somebody's astrology, not necessarily just their rising sign, but you certainly can. I mean, if the ascendant is the health and therefore the happiness, and the ancient astrologers believed it was the physical self, as well as our lesson on Earth, as we talk about in more modern times, then I believe you can see something in a person's nature through their ascendant. If you're really getting stuck, and sometimes you can get bogged down in this, just I don't know which one to choose, and I find the best thing to do is to go away and leave it for a while and come back when you're fresh. But another thing is I'll say to clients, would you mind sending me a photograph? And I'll always take that in the context of what their nationality is, whether I'll say to them, are you darker or lighter than other people of your race, etc. Just it can help. But anyway, back to the number crunching side of Jigsaw. We've now got, we can sort it by ascendant, MC, time. We can auto-test. There's always automatic. If you're stuck, sometimes it helps to just auto-test, and then you kind of go, oh yeah, that's what I'm meant to be doing. You can actually go, well, no, there's no way this person, you can actually delete an angle right from here, but usually it's after you've done these 2 options. Now these are the 2 next steps. We've now taken the data, we've collected it all, we've put it in a format that's viable, Jigsaw has given us some options. Now what we have to do is start the process of testing it, and this is testing in so many ways, testing us and testing the angles. The other thing that's interesting to do just while we're on this one is to put your own, or somebody you know really well, information into this, because what it's also going to do is tell you sensitive points in your own chart. And I've found that that can be actually quite interesting. Usually it's a position that's already there, but it could be interesting if it comes up with something that is not a point that you might normally include in your list of display points. Now, we've got two possible sets of angles here, and the next step, as I said, is to test. So we click on here and we come up with what is called the dynamic search options. Now, what we're looking at is, we want to limit this. You know, if we put the 12th harmonic in here, we're going to end up with every 9 transit to an angle, and it's going to be really, really hard to discern. So we actually want to leave it, particularly at the beginning, before you get used to doing a lot of rectification, at the 2nd harmonic. We're also going to start with transits, but you can come back and do this, as you can see, with secondary progressions, tertiary progressions, and solar arc. You know, once again, it's also really interesting to look at your own chart and have a look at some of these events through things. I don't really use tertiary progressions. I occasionally look at them because John Philby did a really interesting article on them once. But I know astrologers who don't work with anything but solar arc directions, and that's why we've added these extra techniques in later versions. But we start with transits. Clearly we don't want every single thing, but I work with Chiron, so I include that. You may want to click on the Me node or Mars, and we're looking at the events, so again the dynamic points, and what do we want to pick out. Because we're trying to search for a time, we're actually looking at the ascendant, midheaven, and the moon because they're fast moving. You could look at the sun as well if you wanted to, but at this point I'm choosing those. So we click on OK. Now, in the old days on the older computers that used to take a very long time. Now it just whizzes through. So now we have the 2nd harmonic here, and we have up here the transits, the date that they occurred. We're working with this 125 possible time. We have the keywords here because with the transits we're looking at not only what was the transit, so Jupiter to the ascendant, but in this possible chart, what are the other points in the chart that are included? So, for instance, Jupiter is in the 6th house, so it's pulling in the 6th house explanation here. The 1st house, it's triggering the 1st house and the ascendant relationships and Jupiter. So you've got some keywords here that will help you with the rectification process. Down here, clearly we're on, let's just go with this next one, Brother's Born, that's better. Down here you actually see what age the person was with this particular time. You'll see, now blue means it's within range, green means it's accurate, and black means out of range. So you can click on the actual event up here, you'll see it's greyed out, so this is actually not in range. This one is. So I find that this can give you a good idea, but you need to also look at the, like this says, this is basically April 66 to February 67. You'll see it's 173 days. This is where you go through first. We'll go through first and we'll just have a look at the events. Uranus on the MC, Brother Born. Well, yes, I mean, Uranus on the MC or IC when another member of the family comes along, changes this person's position in the family. That is viable not only because it's green, but you can see some links there with the chart. And then we see that if this chart time's correct, Uranus is actually ruling the 3rd house and siblings. So again, that is a big green light for this type of event. We then click through here. Now, what can sometimes happen in the rectification is you can get it down to 1 time, and you'll have a whole year of Pluto transits, but you'll have no events. That's when you get back to your client and you say, I think I've got the correct time, but do you think, or can you remember anything that happened in this year? Now this one, Pluto conjunct the MC, when the family migrated to Australia. That's a big change. We see here, my goodness, Pluto's in the 9th house. They've moved overseas. I guess I've chosen this example because it's a fairly obvious one to me, and I've gone through what I believe to be the correct time or close enough first, because it gives you a clear idea of how Jigsaw can work. It's not always as simple as this, but we can play around for hours on this program. But it's interesting that this person initially said 3:38 p.m. What happened was, when I actually rectified this chart, I kept coming back to this time because of these reasons. It's quite unusual to get something where you go, wow, 9th house overseas, Pluto on the MC, Uranus on the MC ruling the 3rd house. That's a pretty strong statement for good rectification. I'll go into the story of what happened afterwards, but you're getting an idea of how you go through, and as I said, you can either click down here, and even here, first job with Queensland Rail, first position of responsibility. Here's Saturn on the MC, responsibilities, and again, we've got this third house rulership and the 2nd house rulership of Saturn that has been pulled in. But that's clearly the first job, the first income coming in, if you like. And I think that 25 years I put there because I think he stayed there for 25 years, so that's very Saturnian as well, long term. I'm aware that I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to keep talking a lot, but I thought just while we're on this section, this is where you'll spend a lot of time. The next chart will, next section will also spend a lot of time. This is where you'll start to discern between two times. So this time so far, even on the data that we have, is looking pretty good. However, the person has told us 3:38. Now, here we see what I also call a classic example of children being born. So often I see this, Pluto on the moon. It's such a big change, isn't it, having children? So here we have Pluto on the moon, but we've also got it in range. So this, although the moon's not as fast moving as the ascendant and the MC, it's also giving us extra information. Now, married, Saturn on the ascendant. That's not unusual. We won't go into all the astrology of what happens to a marriage with Saturn on the ascendant, but it's not unusual to have that. And again, with this Saturn, it's always coming in with, if this is the correct chart, we're also always looking at the house relationships of where's Saturn in the chart and what is it ruling. That is quite a number for that period of time. You'll see more often than not, you'll have a long list of greyed out. So if you've got a big list of times and you've got so many things greyed out, you can pretty much dismiss it, particularly if one or two come up with, unlike the one that we had, where was it? Sorry, just coming back up here. Lost it. Anyway, the Uranus on there it is, Uranus on the midheaven. Particularly when they start to come up with this this sibling and change of family, etc. If you have something that just doesn't seem right and has lots of greyed out things, I pretty much dismiss it straight out if you've got a lot of times in front of you, because otherwise you're going to be there all day. So you sort of have your judgment call there. But I would then say this is a pretty good time. So even though he said 3:38, I would not dismiss it. We can quit out of this one and we'll just come back and have a very quick look again so you get an idea. And what will often happen too is you'll get down to 2, possibly 3 times, and you just can't choose between the 2. So that's where those other events start to come in, but we'll look at them in the next screen. So we come back here and it's going to do the same process. Jigsaw is going to do the same process for 354. We've got grey, we've got grey. There's one. Now that's not to be dismissed. And Saturn on the IC migrating to Australia is not something I'd rule out straight away. However, I would have to say in my experience, Saturn is not usually the transit I see when people migrate. It's usually Pluto or Neptune, believe it or not. But that's just my experience. But we'd still say that's in there. It is on the IC. It's in this particular chart. You must have Capricorn intercepted. First house, second house, we start to look through Jupiter on the MC. Now, it's also important to kind of notice that this is out, but you might want to adjust your chart further on. You might not want to dismiss this this chart entirely because you might want to adjust it by a few minutes. We're still out, we're still out, we're still out, grey, grey, grey. So you can see we're starting to get through some, sometimes it's better to click on this one. Saturn on the MC, that again is not an unusual thing. That's quite possibly taking on board parent, being a parent. So we note that. Pluto, married on the MC. And well, it's a big change of status. It depends what the marriage is like. This is sometimes where you have to go back and clarify the nature of an event, not just the fact of the event, but the nature of it for that person. Jupiter, built and moved home. It's on the descendant. It depends. Again, if it's coming from a partner's instigation, again, this is where you get extra information from the client. But there's another one, Jupiter on the moon. What was that for? Job promotion? Well, it's up there near the 10th house. This is a time that you wouldn't necessarily dismiss. Divorce, Pluto on the ascendant. Yep, that's a possibility as well, although it's not really pulling in the 7th house except via the axis. But you go through. You're getting the idea of how you actually go through. It's quite a complicated process. Once you've got a couple of times, which we've got here, the other option that you have in Jigsaw, so you would normally go through that process and you'd delete 1 or 2 angles and get it down to a couple, 2 or 3, and you may be really clear that there's one particular chart. The next screen that I find very, very useful in rectification is the chart screen. Now here we have the dynamic chart screen. Are there any questions again? As I said, I've been talking a fair bit and I'm quite happy to stop and answer questions. But are there any questions at this point in time? Okay. We've been testing the angles. We've been looking at the dynamic events to life. We've been looking at that section of Jigsaw. Now we're looking at the dynamic chart section. So this, I think, is one of my favourite screens in all of our astrology. We've got lots of favourites. My sister always says that box of Cadbury favourites is good for me because it's got so many in it. But this is a screen where you actually can come and see a person's life just basically unfolding before you. And you've got your options down. So here's the chart, and here's the dynamic. We're used to this if we've got Solidify or other programs that animate charts. But what's wonderful about this screen is you can actually click on events, and you'll get them up here. And you can actually come here to the options, and you can choose different dynamic points, different aspected points. You can choose to look at them via transits. We'll just look at transits first. So brother born, which time did I choose? 3:54. Migrated to Australia. Just click that one for a minute and choose this other time. Brother born. So we see the Uranus up here on the ascendant. Now we see it's not exact on that date, but it's pretty close. We start to see other things too here. Migrated to Australia. We know that Pluto was up on the MC because of the other report that said it was within range. But we also start to see a broader picture. We're looking at the life of. We start to see the effect that this may have had on that person. We also can have extra information to go back and ask them about. What sort of effect did that move to Australia have on you? You also here, I always put extra points in, so here I start to look at Mars and the North Node. It's also important to have a look at what's sort of hovering around, because you may want to actually adjust the time by a minute or two. You might think, well, this is really close, but this is where we start to do a little bit of fine-tuning, so I might change it to 1:26 p.m. Adjust. And now you'll see 1:26 p.m. And you start to see where everything, you start to get a different picture, I guess, but it also is a good place to be at this point, really starting to look at the chart as a whole. Before we were doing a selection process, and we were certainly bringing in aspects of it, but here we're starting to say, right, I've got two different charts here. I've established a rapport with my client, starting to get to know them a little bit better, and the picture starts to emerge, and you start to look at, well, what does it mean to this person when they built and moved their home? What was that for them? You may also want to come up here and do, just click the buttons, secondary progressions. Wow, built and moved a home, suddenly we see the progressed moon up there. What does that say? Have we got the wrong chart? Or is this emphasizing again that it was is there something else involved here? Was it instigated by a marriage? Was it, there are all sorts of things that we can, is this something the person had always wanted to do? Moon in Libra. Was it a relationship or their partner who instigated this? We start to see different things through the secondary progressions. And you can do the same thing with, as I said, many people work with solar arcs. I'm not as familiar with that. But if we go back to the transits, we can go right through and select that. So this dynamic chart allows you to look at any life event and then see it visually displayed against the chart using those different events up here. You can change the dynamic aspects to be either 4th harmonic, 8th or 12th harmonic. And you can also adjust any date and start to fine-tune. It's a really nice screen. I like it. Now just look here again at the options, because you've got your orb here for your aspects as well. And you've also got the, if you want to broaden your time step of where it steps through, because you can actually, I'll set it in motion, you can actually flick through and stop it. And again, this is a lovely thing to do with your own chart, to have a look at different. Now the other thing that you will notice with this is, as you're getting, well, we're sort of flicking through this fairly quickly today to give you an idea, but where were we? So you might want to just flick through and see, when did that Uranus go on the MC? Okay, it was there. But if we're flicking back, we see Pluto's pretty close, moving. Still Uranus on the MC. You start to see other times in there. You start to see the movement of the planets back and forth, and they change from red to green, obviously, when they're going retrograde and when they're going forward. Now, we look at this and we see that if this chart is indeed correct, Pluto is on the MC during this 1968 period. Now, this is the 8th of October 1968. Now, he's migrated in 1969. That's a pretty big event. This can work two ways. If it's close and you want to just adjust, come down here and adjust your time to get that Pluto on the MC, you can. But if it's, say, 2 years out or a whole year out, this is where you come back and you know that if this is a chart to be worked with. Now, Bernadette always says you're not necessarily going to find the birth time, but you are going to find a birth chart you can work with. I've had some clients who I rectified their charts many years ago, and it's certainly true. Every time they come, we're working with that chart, and it is working. Sometimes you'll never know if it's near the birth time. Sometimes they will actually find a record or find something further down the track. But if you are down to one or two charts, and then what happens is you start leaning towards one chart that you want to select for a person, but you find that in a particular year, Pluto was on the MC, and you know that something, if this is the correct chart, something had to have happened, but they've not given you any information for that particular year. This is when it is really vital, I believe, to go back and dig and basically say, what happened? Now, we take the planet, Pluto on the MC, we ask the person, what happened that changed the course of your life? We know that it will be ascendant, so it may have had something to do with health and happiness. If this chart is correct, Pluto also rules the 12th house. So it may have been an accident, it may have been a health issue, it may have been Pluto in the 9th house, it may simply have been that they decided to take a sabbatical for the year. But we know that something had to have happened in that year for this chart time to be correct. And this is where it's really important, I think, to go back to the client and start to really correlate Jigsaw and the number crunching that it's done for us with the person's life. We also know that if this chart has Scorpio rising, in the other chart it was Sagittarius rising. So we start to look for some prominent features. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does give you a helping hand. It is also here that I look at other events. So clearly some events are not being triggered on the angles. Some of them are actually going to be something completely different. I had one client once who had not had what I would call an eventful life. She'd had a very, very quiet life by her own admittance. She had a few job changes, a few home changes. She'd never been married, never been divorced. She loved her pets. And it was really, really difficult to find a birth time for her. And eventually I found one of these other events, I got it down to a couple. One of the other events that helped me finally choose the chart was she described the Saturn-Venus transit as the worst time in her life because her animals died. One of her beloved dogs, she had pets. And I realized that with one of the times that I had chosen, the 6th house was actually then ruled by Venus, and there were other things as well, but if you changed the time, it took the emphasis completely off the 6th house. So in the end, although I've used events and transits to the angles to get the chart, it's then that you start fine-tuning by looking at the other events and how they work within that chart. And as I said, if you've got somebody who's provided you with precision times, and I was demoted on 6th of February 1956 at 1:55 p.m. and you've got no Virgo in the chart and you've got a possible Virgo rising, I say use it. So we're looking here at altering the chart, at moving it back and forward in time, at getting a lovely picture of what's happening here. You'll see that sometimes you rule out an event affecting somebody in terms of an angle because, being made redundant and being forced to retire or being forced to end something is often a Saturn-Sun transit. So you know that unless that person's got the Sun on the angle, which they have here, and rectifying charts with angular planets is hard. It's harder than other ones because you're not able to isolate. I mean, for instance, you can see here that being made redundant and your father dying are very Saturn-Sun statements. So, does that pull anything else in or does it not? But by the time you've got to this stage, it's coming down to what I call crunch time, which is you often end up with one or two charts, as in this case, and with this particular example, I just kept coming back to this chart for so many reasons, even though the other one at 3:54 had some good points and also was closer to the time that the parents said. I then went and researched on the internet to see if there were children coming back and forth from school at 1:25 p.m. And it's as he explained, it was possible where he lived that was the case. I changed that a little bit to have to 1:26, but that's the chart that he's currently working with. That's the manual rectify. What I want to do just briefly before we end is say that you can do, as I said before, an auto rectify. I don't use it because I feel that I need more input myself, but one thing that you can do is just quickly have a look at the auto rectify and it will do the same thing for you. In this case it's come up with similar things. We just go here, again we say it's the auto. I should change that. So it's basically going through the process for you automatically. So it's giving you a viability report. It's giving you viability is the wrong word. It's giving you a scoring. I guess it's scoring that thing. It's saying you've got 5 out of 8 possible transits, 4 out of 7, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 2, etc. And then it's giving you a percentage. And I guess this is where I find it difficult to use the auto-rectify because it gives you a percentage. And I've found that it can sometimes give an angle of 98%, whereas the one I use has something like 30%. And I think this is where, with JigSaw, it's a very powerful rectification tool. It is so wonderful when you are using it and you're getting familiar with it and going through this process with it, but it does require a lot of astrological input and assessment. And I feel it's a little bit dangerous to leave out that astrological assessment and rely on JigSaw alone. But, one of the things I would suggest is if you feel a little bit more comfortable doing that is actually just coming in and playing with that auto-rectify. Now, the other thing you may just simply want to do, which I do, is at the end of my process, what I then do is if I've selected one particular time, I then send it to Solar Fire. So I just sent it straight through the time that you've selected. I did change it to 1:26 p.m. Gives you the chart, And then what I do is I come to my transits and progressions as a final check. I have a thing here called life events. This person, I take it from the 1st of January 1965. I take it, well, however many years you want to do. Let's make it 55. And I actually then view those life events in date, time, order. And I just quickly, and you can do it just to the angles if you want to, but let me just see. Just do it again. You can actually do it to the angles and have a quick look. Some of them we'll see we're already familiar with, but what it does is it just helps me test whether I've missed anything. So 1995, Pluto over the Ascendant. There was not a date that came up in my rectification. So I want to just go and check that with, as a final check with the client to see if this is the date that we should be working with. So I find this a really useful thing to do for myself between Solar Fire and Jigsaw. Now I think we've been through a lot. I just wondered if there are any questions, because I think we've got a little bit of time left. No? Yep. Is anybody still there? Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Radu. I wonder if I could ask a couple of questions.
Yep.
Do you have any tips for when you only have a relatively short history, for example, 5 to 10 years, and therefore a lot of your dates are going to be less than 6 months apart? I mean, obviously you can turn off some of the outer planets, but are there any other general tips you could give?
I think that's really, really difficult. I have found that it's far easier to rectify somebody who's had basically, I think, 45 plus years. I think it becomes far easier because, as I was saying before, the breadth of the data over many years really increases your chances of finding an accurate birth time. And you'll see that even if you do, I mean, I know a lot of people take Jigsaw, and I've had this comment a lot over the years. I put my own chart in, my own data, and it doesn't come up with my birth time. Why not? It will if you have accurate data, but it also needs many, many years. So I guess the answer I do is that I actually don't. I think that probably what I would do is use the chart dynamic screen a lot more, the one that we were this one. I would switch off some of the events when they show up as being too close, and I'd probably almost go, I'd see what it comes up with, depending also on what the range of time you have, but I would very much just keep using this one here, so where you've got all of your events, and I would keep going through them and seeing what correlates here rather than so much the test angles. But that is a difficult one. So it doesn't often happen unless you're doing research on somebody who didn't live very long, because most people these days do record their children's time of birth, and most hospitals do, at least in Australia. But it can happen in areas of trauma, and also areas. One of the big difficult ones is some of the people who were born during the war, or even in Macedonia at a certain time after the war, don't even know, or born in concentration camps, don't even know what day they were born. So then you're again here looking at the Sun, the Venus, and the slower moving ones, because you're wanting to actually look at well, for instance, this guy who was made redundant and his father died, then the Saturn on the Sun is the first point of rectification. Then you start looking at the angles. So maybe that's the other thing I would look at too is in the case of my own, if there's any big events that happen very early in a child's life or in a person's life, that's an indicator that they've probably got one of the major planets or a transit of Mars or something like that very close to an angle, because things have happened not far from their birth. So I would also include Chiron if you can. In my own case, I had a life or death situation in my chart. I'm probably going to get a little personal here, but
I'm not quite sure.
in my chart, Mars is in the ascendant, and Chiron is very close to the MC. By the time I was 5 months old, they both kind of come into play on the ascendant and the MC. So those sorts of things, if you've got events that are actually happening very close to birth, then you can start to place some sort of, you can discern the nature of those events and place them close to the angles and see if Jigsaw comes up with anything like that.
Right, thanks.
I don't know if that was much help, but... And Anne, did you have a...
It was a point of comment, actually, Stephanie.
Do you have a question?
There was a comment.
Yes.
Likely your 125 is more likely to be correct because the lunchtime in Nixon, most of England, where I come from, went till 1:30, and out time is at 4 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. Thanks. Yeah, that was a really fascinating one because the man was so open and so friendly, and but very, very keen on getting this birth time correct. And you know, the time that Jigsaw came up with was the 3:54. Seemed so close to what he was talking about, but seemed very just didn't seem. The other one seemed so accurate. So I guess further down the track he'll come back and tell me how it's going for him. But it also relied on, and it is good when, you know, I remember somebody years ago wanted me to rectify their birth chart. They were born at, was it Murray Bridge, I think, when the train went through. So my mother remembered hearing the train signal go. So it was a case of also looking up and researching what time the train or trains went through Murray Bridge. So you can get some real, it can be a lot of fun, but it is a lot of work. It's many hours work. But it's a lovely thing to specialise in, particularly if right from the start, as I was saying from the start, it took me a while to work it out, but to really involve the person in this is such a profound thing to do. To gather it looks like facts and figures, but it's actually a person's life story all laid out there. It's also interesting, I guess the other thing I should say is you will find that obviously the sun, the moon, and a lot of the personal planets will colour how a person views life as well, but sometimes that missing link is in the ascendant, and you will find that the emphasis that somebody puts on the selected events. Some people will select all the career events. Their first draft will be, I changed job here, I got promoted here, I got recognised here, I won an award here. And of course you go back and say, now can I have some other types of events? But noting that they've chosen them and that's their priority is another, I guess, if you like, and that's why we ended up calling it Jigsaw. That's another piece of the Jigsaw for you in rectification, because the fact that that's their first point of call and that's what they place emphasis on. Somebody else, it might be, yes, well, I separated here, I divorced here, I got the paperwork through on such and such a date, and then I remarried, and then I moved in with one person on this date, then I moved out again, And again, that will then tell you, well, let's look at the 7th house as opposed to the 10th house, where the planets could be, which then again helps you with the ascendant. So it's a fascinating process. Any other questions?
Can I ask, what's the opinion regarding the use of a parallax or corrected moon, or parallax and aberration and latitude versus the geometric moon?
I don't know. Part of me says the parallax one makes more sense, and I think because none of us will, not in my area of education, in astrological education, I was just, brought on the geocentric tropical one. So people tend to use the parallax when they're doing new moons and things like that, but in rectification I haven't tried a difference. Because I don't use it in my natal work, I don't use it for rectification. But I'd certainly be interested, maybe I can put something like that on the Solar Fire group and see what other people do. Or there's a guy on Facebook who's got a group called Astrological Consultation, Edmund Wallman, I think his name is. He has some really fascinating astrological debates. That might be one for there. But yeah, it's a good question. I tend not to use the parallax moon, but I know some people do. In Solar Fire, you have an option. I should have just we come up here. We've got different zodiacs. I don't know if we actually have a different. I don't think.
It's there in Solar Fire, but I haven't seen it in Jigsaw. But I would imagine that if you import charts from Solar Fire, it might keep the parallax correction.
Yeah, it might, and then you could run it around and see. Yeah, it's a good question. Right, think about that one. But,
the relevance for me here is that I'm not a professional astrologer, but I had a go at doing some rectifications, and the way I would start would be to get the position of the moon first, because that would localize the time to a few hours. But the parallax difference can make a difference of 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah, I can see what you're doing. You're kind of breaking it down in steps. But if you then I would probably not use the parallax moon in that case. I would use the tropical geocentric one, and I would then see if I was finding that wasn't working, then I'd probably switch back and see how it went with the parallax. But you're kind of adding an extra step in the process that you might not need.
Sure.
From an astrological point of view, I guess it's one of those things that you could debate. There are some things that are debatable, and I guess I come back to what I have found has worked. I see what you're saying. It's a really unique use of that. I'll probably go away and experiment a bit. But I guess I would then ask you, do you find that it makes any difference when you do it that way?
I haven't done my homework enough, to be honest. I probably need to spend time researching one method and another. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be. I think anything that helps get clarity is good.
Can I ask just what?
You go.
Can I ask just one more thing? You've said you usually start with a manual rectification. Okay, so you get a few dates. Does auto rectify always back up your findings, or does it sometimes give you things that you wonder how did it get that?
Correct. The second. I'm not. Right. I must admit, I must get back to Bernadette and find out why auto rectify is sometimes different to manual rectify. But I've found that it can come up with different. I think it's because the default when I manual rectify, I actually know what I'm doing. I know what preferences, options, and things that I've selected screen by screen, and I've set my defaults. I think auto rectify might go on a different set of preferences that are actually auto saved in the system, and that's why it comes up with different ones. But I'm not sure, so I tend to. I guess too, I just like to have that extra level of control and knowing what I'm doing and why I've got it, because it helps me understand why I'm choosing a particular time over another one. But yeah, you're right, sometimes it does come up with different ones. But the main issue for me is also, just as I said, that percentage thing can really throw me out. It affects me at the beginning of the process. If I go back after the process as I did today, then you find you're not being influenced by it as much. It's just an interesting point to note. But I find the more open you can be right at the beginning to matching the person with the time and the chart, the better results you'll get, because you'll actually be making a judgment that combines both, I guess both the left and the right brain, if you want to put it that way, but the person and the numbers. Whereas if you come up right at the beginning with an auto, and for instance it says 44% for 1:26 p.m. and 90% for 3:54, you might go, oh, well, you know, it's affected you, and you're not necessarily seeing something with completely. I mean, it can work the other way too. The guy said 3:38, so I kept wanting the 3:54 time to fit. But at the end of the day, I had to get back to him and say, could it have been lunchtime and not after school that she heard? And I mean, people are usually coming to you because they've got anecdotal evidence. If their parents were still alive, they'd be taking the time that their mother or father gave them, even if it was wrong, because that's what their mother or father told them. Normally their parents are deceased and they've got no birth record, and they're going on anecdotal, my auntie told me this, or my mum when she was alive told me that. So it's not always reliable, but it is, and that's why it's also good. It's good to question everything. I had one woman once who who got her birth time of 9:20 a.m. and she told me 3:20 or 3:40 p.m. and I said, look, I can't go past this chart. Can you? And her parent was actually still alive. And she went back to her mother, and it turned out that the mother said, well, no, your brother was born at 9:20 and you were born. Then the mother said, well, maybe it was the other way round. So it always, I mean, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you just got to get back to the drawing board and keep going until you find something that, you know, fits what that person's telling you to a certain extent. But it's always good to remember that astrology is so often right. Not the astrologer, I wish, but astrology is so often is accurate. It works. Okay,
right. So
you got any questions? Are you okay? You still with us?
Yes.
Do you have any questions, or?
No, I really appreciate what you've demonstrated. Thank you.
That's okay. And Radu, did you have another one?
Oh no, I guess the conclusion from what you say is that if auto rectifies doesn't confirm your conclusions, what you've found from manual rectify, it does not mean that you're wrong.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks very much.
If there's one thing I could emphasize about this program, is it is your tool. It is not the guru, if that makes sense. It is there for us to use. Just because it throws a number up, it's there to be helpful, it's there to be used, it's there to be utilized, but at the end of the day, we have to make the assessment ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Rhonda, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yep, thank you.
You want to end now?
We've still got everybody on.
Want me to throw it back to you?
No, there's no point because there's nothing on my screen. We've done what we're doing.
I'm just not sure how to get out of here, so I'll just close things down and see
Oh,
what
okay.
happens.
Yeah, I'll take it back then.
Okay.
Change
Thank
presenter.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, you're back on me now.
Thanks.
Hmm.
I like the lavender back desktop. That's good.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you again.
Did Anne, did you get your... Oh, she's gone. Okay. See you later, Pam.
Bye-bye. Thank you.